Yeah, so Dreyer talked about, that the reason for shooting so much of the film in close-up, and he said there were questions. It was basically based on his study of the trial transcripts, which the bulk of the dialogue in the film is based on. He said that only that approach could convey what he called the close quarter combat of the trial. Wow. He said there were questions, there were answers, very short, very crisp. Each question, each answer quite naturally called for a close-up. In addition, the result of the quote close-ups was that the spectator was as shocked as Joan was receiving the questions and tortured by them.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Close quarter combat.
And so
that's spot on.
And that enables this unique acting style, not only of Falconetti, but of all these actors in the films, the way that he shoots them differently, because he's just focused on a few actors at a time or one actor at a time. He lights them differently. The priest and her interrogators are shot high contrast, and that sort of like shows their unappealing details in their faces to be fully visible. She's given this soft, even lighting. He does low angle shots of her persecutors, which make them more like sort of intimidating. There's also, I just throw this in here because there's nowhere else we'll talk about it and we won't go into it, but he shot the film from the first to the last scene in the order of this film, which is very rarely done, which means that the priest actors who had to shave their heads to get tonsures, they had to keep it for long periods of time. They couldn't just do it for a week and then grow it back. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that the actors had to go through, but yeah.
Can I just make like, again, everything you're saying just goes into this whole, I just find the film fascinating for how it's chasing a kind of realism. It's really, there's like, it explicitly starts by saying this is based on a historical account. We're not trying to do like a legend here. We're trying to do the history. We're going to the sources. We're doing this modern scientific kind of like excavation of
the first
Joan of
shot
Arc story
is taking out the manuscript.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost like, it really is like basically almost saying like we're doing history here, and then everything into the intensity of the emotions and like trying to place you in the trial. And yet, anyway, all that stuff you just mentioned, Thomas, about it's really kind of driving towards this desire for realism. But I just find it so striking that at the film's kind of most climactic moments, it's again, with what we were talking about with the editing earlier, like it really kind of moves away from realism. It's moving really more towards surrealism,
with the gestures in the circus atmosphere and
and surrealism, of course, was like hand in hand with film in the 1920s. Like they were very close friends, in artistic movements and things like that. But it's just striking how that drive for realism, you kind of end up somewhere else that's much more, again, like subjective, idealistic.
And the film also ends with a complete departure from history with this riot that breaks out, which is not from the transcripts.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up, Nathan, because this was something that I was definitely thinking about, especially on my second viewing of the film. Because I always try to pay attention to what are like the opening moments, what are the opening images, like what does the filmmaker give us to kind of like color the rest of our viewing of this film. And it's definitely significant that like from the beginning, he's like hammering home that these transcripts are real and like, it's like the original based on a true story, but of course now when we see based on a true story, we're almost like conditioned to dismiss it and be like, okay, like
Fargo,
how based on a true story is this? But here you're basically given to think like, wow, this is just the transcripts. Now, to what degree that's the case or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that if you do actually just watch this movie without that sort of preface, this is not a film that's like concerned about realism. It's definitely grounded in a realism, right? And I think that's what that opening sequence is doing. I think that probably Dreyer is intuiting or understanding that audiences need to be grounded in the reality of this, because what he's about to do is take it to some pretty stylized places.
Right.
It's nothing like, like crazy and avant-garde, but it is like intense and it is definitely of a style. And and it's not realism. I mean, the first time you see Joan of Arc's expression, this isn't realism.
Right.
I mean, like
the realism is more the dialogue a lot of it being taken directly from the transcripts. It's not the stylistic realism.
Right. But I think that Dreyer probably wants to ground it in a sense of realism so that the stylistic choices can sort of be sustained, if that makes sense.
Sure.
It's almost like you don't even notice that you're watching something highly stylized. You accept it on its own terms.
Yeah.
But actually it's very, very highly stylized, from the performances to the cinematography to the set dressing, and actually to me it seems to be of a piece with the same impulse to build this totally expensive, detailed recreation set and then not really utilize it.
Right.
It's like, well, we need to ground this in a reality, because what we're going to try to do is take this into the stratosphere, One of my favorite moments is right after St. Joan of Arc receives communion. There's just like such a incredible quality to her gaze as she looks up in prayer. And in fact, a lot of the shots of Falconetti have an iconic quality to them. They almost look like you could take them and just slap them into a stained glass window, and here is like an icon of a saint.
Right.
She even has the face of a icon of the Theotokos, like the from Our Lady of Vladimir or something like that, the classic Russian Byzantine icons of Our Lady. Like she has that kind of facial structure as well, which I think that's what you're saying.
So I would say that like the main thing going on in her performance is what's happening in her eyes, but then there's like a level of precision and focus of what she's doing with other different parts of her face. I mean, at that level of close up, the slightest twitch of the eye, is as dramatic as me waving my arms across the stage, to people in the upper balcony. Because when you're zoomed in that close, the slightest change in facial features, we notice it. So Dreyer is very much like painting with these strokes, and you can almost see him giving the instructions to the actors, like, okay, here you're going to let your grimace turn into a frown, or here you're going to slowly raise your eyebrow, or slowly turn your face, or here you're gonna twitch your left eye, or I don't know if he was
I can tell you about I can tell you about this method if you want, and how they worked.
Sure. But I'll just finish up by saying that's very much part of the visual storytelling here. Is what are the subtle things that are going on in the faces, sometimes just for a split second, but definitely with Falconetti, it's like not only does Dreyer find a million different ways to shoot her face, she finds a million different ways to express and emote with nothing but her face. I mean, it's really quite challenging as an actor to be robbed of the entire rest of your body. Now, of course, I'm certain the rest of her body is activated, that she's using the rest of her body to achieve what she's doing with her face. But of course, we're not seeing the rest of what she's doing with her body. All we're seeing is what she's doing with her face. So, she could be running on a treadmill for all we know. But what we're seeing is everything's focused in here,
Yeah.
And that's it's raw, it's intense, it's interior. That's definitely one of the the effect that's given not just from her performance but from others is like you get the sense of what's going on interiorly beneath the surface, of people.
Can I ask just a quick question, James, just with regards to what you're saying about the I guess kind of like the infinite renewability, the constant newness of what she's doing. Do you think that is kind of like coming out of her craft as an actor, that like it's 100% that, or is it kind of like part of just the infinite potentiality of being of a human face, I guess I wonder, how much do you think it's like accidental? How much do you think it's intentional?
I think it has to be coming out of her craft. I mean, it's miraculous if you ask me, this performance. Like I can't tell you how hard that is to do. To not just look like the same in every scene. But especially in something like this, where it's like, it would become so easy for something to just be one note. And oftentimes the more fraught the emotion, the more one note a performance becomes.
Yeah.
It becomes really, really difficult to find nuance at those really like high pitched emotions. But she's like crying in half the scenes. But I really think that she's finding different colors, different intentions, different responses. I mean, she's conveying so much information to us, the audience, with the way she's responding to everything that's being done around her.
Yeah.
It's like a definitive performance, if you ask me. Like, I mean, this could go up there as like best film performance of all time. I would feel comfortable saying that.
And if
it's usually on the short list whenever mean, it's all the lists, but like that, whenever it comes up, she's usually at the top of the list.
And James,
what I've seen,
as far as this renewability is concerned, I think you indicated that this is true to some extent of the other actors as well. I mean, and that may be a question of writing and directing as well, but there's a lot of situations where you're seeing these actors in the same. There's a limited number of scenarios that these actors are in the film, right? But some of the main inquisitors, you do get different nuances of the same emotions or different moments and different asides and stuff that keep it fresh, even though they're often sort of doing the same things.
I'll tell you one that's really remarkable is right at the end, after she's signed her confession, and then she's taken back and she's gotten her hair cut, and she recants and says she's made a mistake, and the Grand Inquisitor, I guess he's the bishop. He comes in and for the first time there's like this like fatherly quality in him. I don't know if you got that too, but the way that he's framed and the juxtaposition of the way that she's framed and the kind of expression in his face, there's like a tenderness that isn't present for any of the preceding films.
But he's not yelling at her there like in so many of the other parts, and you get that with some of the other actors in that scene too, because it's like now they know, oh, now this is real and we're actually going to kill her. And you see this like these moments of them just like processing it and looking kind of like bummed out. Oh, like this is real. Like it's come to the point we don't have any other choice. We either have to like renounce everything what we've been doing, or we're going to have to kill this girl.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you got to imagine is probably not far from what it was actually like,